Greeting HMC friends. And today, the first words that need to come off our lips are thanks be to God. Thanks be to God for a peaceful day yesterday, when we anticipated that there could have been such mayhem. And with just cause, after we have faced in recent years. But thanks be to God. Indeed, prayers have been answered. And so this means we can relax and enjoy our public holiday, Human Rights Day. This day when we remember the right of another person who is around us. For us in South Africa, that is based, and this holiday is based out of the massacre that took place at Sharpeville in the 1960s. And so when we think of human rights, we remember that this is a deeply gospel understanding. Matthew writes those words that we need to behave and treat people as we would want them to treat us. Ephesians, Paul writes about how we need to treat one another with compassion, with kindness. I have been reading a really interesting book called The Dressmakers of Auschwitz. And it's the fascinating story of some female prisoners who landed up in Auschwitz. And these women could sew. And it was their sewing skills that actually saved their lives. For surrounding the Auschwitz concentration camp were all the officers' homes and the officers' wives who belonged to high society and the privileged society and who needed nice clothes. And these women were to produce them for them. Many of these women had worked for some of the best fashion houses in Europe and had been reduced to prisoners, clinging on to life. And their skill is what they were able to use. And so they were protected. But what really struck me in the story of struggle, the story of privilege, is how the chief officer of the Auschwitz camp had a beautiful home right on the outside of the concentration camp. It was a magnificent home that was well tended by many of the prisoners. And the officer's wife was a woman who had fine taste. She employed, and in the word employed, used many of the prisoners to develop vast gardens, a beautiful hothouse with some of the best blooms that were available at the time. And while she was dressed by these dressmakers, she entertained all the hierarchy that were to come and to visit and to see and to be part of the machinery of Auschwitz. But the reality was that her home and her garden backed onto the border of the part of the concentration camp where the crematoriums were. And there, cheek to jowl, those two communities existed. One of the things I found very difficult to read was that the pathways of her garden were actually built, and then ash was used to create them and to give them their identity. And that was human ash from the crematoriums. And while she dined, and while she grew her flowers, and while she dressed in some of the finest clothing, on the other side of the fence, millions were to perish as they were taken into the so-called showers that never gave water, but the shower heads that pumped out gas. And how one lived alongside the other, and her total unawareness of what was happening on the other side of that wall. I believe that Human Rights Day is a day for us as Christians to be able to ask the question, how goes it with my neighbor? What's happening on the other side of the wall? And even in the neighborhoods in which we live, we so seldom even know who our neighbor is. And so maybe today is the day to ask the question, who is my neighbor? To maybe introduce myself to my neighbor, or to be a neighbor. That would take us a long way down in being able to celebrate the human right of the person who lives alongside me, or works with me, or who I encounter daily. And so let's hold on to this gospel principle. Today, a lovely Lenten question. Who is my neighbor? God bless and take care.